So my name's Linda Johnston. I'm an emotional health and well-being coach. And just some of the things that I do, number one, I would do one-to-one coaching. Secondly, I would do like group work, and there's some leaflets down the back if anybody wants to have a look at those, and my contact details are on that. And the third thing that I would do is the likes of this, where I use media to raise awareness of topics that perhaps people are fearful about talking about, and sort of opening up the conversation in communities so that we can openly talk about. I know Matthew did an interview with me looking at living with depression, and it was fantastic. And I mean, the views on Facebook were amazing, weren't they? It was like 6,500, I don't know, like it was really, really, really good. So that kind of thing is just to raise awareness. And I feel that, you know, when we listen to somebody else's story, that's just a wonderful way, isn't it, where we can understand a little bit more about the topic. So whenever I was thinking about doing this around the area of suicide, I mean, lots of people said, oh, why does somebody not do something about it? So I thought, okay, I can do something, and I wanted to do something creative. So Joel, my youngest son, is a music producer. So he was in Leeds University, and he was producing Ryan's EP. So that whenever Joel was telling me what he was doing and what the EP was about, I thought, well, that would be amazing just to bring him over here, and I could interview him. And so that's just exactly what we're going to do now. So this is Ryan. Come on ahead, Ryan. So maybe just if you would give us a little bit of background of your childhood.
Yeah. I was born in 1994, and I was born to two parents who unfortunately separated not many years after I was born, and I had sort of a fleeting relationship with my father for about 6 or 7 years after that, and then sadly about 3 years after I last saw him, he committed suicide, and it was quite rough because I didn't understand what was going on when I was a child. You know, I was only about 10 or 11 when it happened, and I wasn't fully explained the situation until I turned about 17, which is when I actually found out it was a suicide. So I spent from the ages of about 10 to 11 until 17 just not really knowing what had happened with my dad. And when I did find out, when I turned 17, that sort of put me into a quite heavy depression. And that was something that I also dealt with for about 2 or 3 years, and that kind of brings me to the EP, really.
Yeah. So I mean, even if we, just sort of talk about that time. So had you were finished school at that stage? I was
in year 6, I think. I was just going into year 7 when my dad passed away, and obviously that's quite an important developmental time for a child. So it was definitely a strange period for me. I was quite a strange kid, not having my dad around and stuff. But it was, I was just going into school, and like I say, I didn't really understand the full extent of the situation because my mum had never explained it to me in full, and I think that was mainly because I wouldn't never expect somebody to try and explain suicide to an 11-year-old child. You know what I mean? It's not something you can just easily explain to a kid.
So then, if you can just explain a little bit more, whenever you were 17, whenever you. How did it happen? What happened?
So it was basically I had some. I started to get very curious around the age of about 16, where I had said to my mum various times, I'd asked her up front what had happened, and I wanted to know more about the situation. But I think she was generally quite fearful to tell me because my family and my mum never really had much of a fundamental understanding of mental health and depression and that kind of thing, and what might lead somebody to commit suicide. So when I turned 17, I sort of did a tiny bit of digging, and I confronted my older brother about it, and my brother sort of bared all to me one evening, and we just had a huge conversation about it. And it was initially it was a big shock, like I say, and it was at a period where I was sort of going through a transition because I'd just moved out of college, and I, to be quite honest, had no idea where I was going. I was making music and I was gigging and stuff, but I didn't really know where I could take that. Mm-hmm. So that coupled with finding something out like that really, really did affect me with the depression and stuff, as I say.
And you were saying, you know, that you grew up in Gateshead,
Yeah,
wasn't
it was Gateshead that grew. So that's in the northeast of England. So it was, you know, it's quite a quiet area. You know, it's about 10-15 minutes away from Newcastle upon Tyne. So I was never far from a city, and you know, I always had that at my fingertips essentially. But you know, there was not a lot of opportunity where I was, and sort of creativity and doing anything other than, you know, starting a family and working was quite alien to a lot of people, including my family, because, you know, it was a heavy working class background that I came from, and they found it very, very weird at first that I wanted, you know, to sort of be a musician. And I think, again, that was another thing that contributed to the depression, because it was very much a small town mentality where I felt very much trapped by my surroundings and by my environment, and that just made it even worse. Yeah.
So how did the depression affect you?
So in the initial sort of the initial like starting of it, when I sort of went on that spiral, it was something that I didn't really understand what was going on, because again I had never been taught what it was or what depression could be, so I didn't know what I even had. I just thought I felt really down for some reason, and you know, I didn't understand what was happening, and then I became suicidal. And you know, I had, you know, some periods of self-harm and stuff like that, because that was a way that I felt like I could control it, and it was something that I, you know, could use to ignore what was going on and ignore all the awful things that I had behind me. You know what I mean? And sort of like the 2-year period before I moved to Leeds a few years ago, and the 2-year period where I left college and was at home was by far the roughest part, because I had no idea where I was going. I had no idea what I was going to do with myself, and it just coupled with everything, it was just awful. Yeah, it was not nice.
Mm-hmm. And so, what do you think was it that helped whenever?
So
in those years?
the biggest, by far the biggest thing was the music and the songwriting and stuff, and you know, it was something I had been very passionate about since I was, again, quite young, because right around the time of my dad's passing was when I was just starting to pick up the guitar. So I had already been playing and, you know, performing for roughly 6 or 7 years. Well, I've been performing for a couple of years, but I've been playing for about 6 or 7 years. And you know, it was sort of a really, really valuable way for me to say things that I didn't feel comfortable saying in conversation, or didn't feel comfortable saying face to face with someone, because I could write a song and it could be as ambiguous as I liked, and nobody would understand what it was about, but I could get on a stage and sing it, and I knew what it was about, and as long as I'd expressed that, then it didn't really matter if anybody got it, to be honest, because I still had, you know, that I still had the chance to get it out, essentially.
Mm. So then, you were saying then you went to Leeds, so tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I moved to Leeds in 2014, it was, September, because I studied at Leeds College of Music, which was where I met Joe, and that was a bit of a shock at first, because obviously, as I say, I was so used to being in this tiny town with you know, nothing to do, and all of a sudden I was living in the centre of a big city with all of these musicians and artists around me and stuff, and it was sort of like, in the first year there was a large adjustment period. You know, I was going through a rough relationship, which was also a massive contributor, and I was still sort of in that depression phase, and I felt like, you know, I had to just sort of get on with it to a point. Like, I got to a point where it was like, I got over the homesickness, and you know, that lasted for a while. You know, like for my whole first year, it was, again, like I say, it was very, very weird for me to be on my own, because I've never experienced anything like that. But then, you know, as the years went on, and as I got into my second and third year, it was more like I felt like I could sort of become the person that I had wanted to be for so long, where it was like I couldn't express myself properly at home, or, you know, back in Gateshead, because nobody really understood what I wanted to do, and nobody really nurtured it, so to speak, because they didn't know how to, you know. So moving to Leeds was a very, very good decision, because that was a huge weight off my shoulders, because I was in a new area, and I was out of that environment that made me feel so secluded and made me feel so alone, essentially.
Mm. And in terms of relationships, do you think that just what you'd gone through would have affected relationships that you
Yeah, it was.
had?
So as I said, I was in a relationship in my first year at university, and I didn't realise that I still had some sort of leftover resentment and some leftover issues from my dad's passing, because it was never something I had properly addressed, to be quite honest. And I got to the end of 2015, and I went through a very, very rough breakup with this girl, and after that sort of forced me to get some counselling and get some therapy about it, and it made me realise that I did have some abandonment issues, and the reason that I had been in this relationship was because there was a really large space inside of me that I needed to fill, that my dad had left, and I was filling that with a bad relationship essentially. So it didn't really help. It just contributed to the depression, and it just made things a lot worse really. But when I did get out of it, it was a really positive experience, because the relationship was rough and the breakup was as well. But by the time I was out and I'd had the counselling, it was really, really good to be able to reflect on that. And hindsight is always 20/20, as you say, where it's like you can look back and say, I realised these negative things, but also the positives, and you learn a lesson from it.
And even in terms of counselling, what did you find was helpful, for when you were going to counselling?
I think it was having sort of like the space where there was no judgment or anything. There was absolutely no preconceptions of me whatsoever as a person, because people say you can go to friends and you can go to family, but those people know you. They know who you are, and they have an image of you painted in their head. So when you tell them something that you're feeling, they might think it's not indicative of your character. You know what I mean? And that's weird for a person. I think I think it could be quite a strange experience for somebody to be told that one of their close loved ones is experiencing something like that. So the most important thing for me was speaking to someone who didn't know me, didn't know where I was from, and didn't need to know that. They just knew that I had a problem and needed to talk about it, and they just let me do that. And I think that was all I really needed to do for the longest time.
So just being able to talk.
Yeah, just being able to get it off my chest and have it be reciprocated, in the sense that they could tell me things that they had observed from, and things that they thought might be occurring in my head as a result of the things I'd experienced.
So then that takes us into third year, I suppose.
Yeah, third year. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit just about how.
So when I started writing the EP, which is called Hung Out to Dry, I started writing that at the end of my first year and the beginning of my second year, because when I was studying, that was my assignment. I just had to write some original songs, and I had already started writing a bunch of songs, but I didn't really feel as though I had any sort of emotional attachment to those songs. I didn't feel like they were up to scratch for my standards, and it was, as I say, as I was going through that breakup, it was as I was starting to write the EP as well, and I felt like because I'd written songs about my dad beforehand, very, very ambiguously, and not really completely brutally addressing the situation, I felt like I needed to write a bunch of songs that really were brutally honest and just were everything that I wanted to say and everything that I'd wanted to get off my chest, aimed directly at my dad. And I think as much as it was an assignment, it was also a really, really good source of sort of catharsis for me, because I just got to write down a lot of things on paper that I'd wanted to say for so long, and some of the things I didn't even realise I wanted to say. It was just when you get writing and when you get creative with this kind of thing, it's just turning a negative into a positive, really, because it's taking something that's affected you so awfully and turning it into something that people can respond to and people can listen to, and that's really important, I think. To be honest, I think when people say, "Oh, it's brave that you do that," or it's good that you can get up on the stage and do that, and I think it's because when you go through sort of a depression, or when you experience something like the suicide of a loved one or a parent, it gets to a point where you grieve for so long that I think for me anyways, it was sort of, I realised that I had to do more than just grieve, and it had to become about more than just me, because I understood that other people were suffering from this, and other people needed to see that other people understood, and I think it's a really good way to let people know that there is other people out there who are going through the same thing, and I understand is what I'm basically trying to say with these tunes.
Yeah. But I mean, it really is so open and so raw, and I think the line, you gave up the chance to see your boy grow into a man. that just really gets to me. I mean, that's just,
Yeah.
as a parent as well, that really, really gets to me.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was because I think the reason that I sort of stuck that line onto the end was because, you know, the rest of the song is very much me saying, you know, I resent you for this. You know, like I have some really harsh feelings towards you for this, but I'm still going to grow up and go on to do other things and go on to do what I want to do, and you know, you gave up the chance to see that. So it's sort of a way of finishing the song on a more lighter note as opposed to just leaving it where it was, you know.
I mean, even the bit in the middle where you talked about, you know, the handwritten note that you could have perhaps done. Tell me a little bit about that.
I think when I wrote that lyric, it was because I was told during the whole, you know, all the conversations about my dad's suicide that he had written a note, and you know, it was aimed in part specifically at me and my older brother. You know, he said that he missed us and that he wanted to see us and that he regretted a lot of the choices that he made. But it was sort of like, well, if he felt that way, then he could have come and seen us, and you know, maybe we could have helped him, and that was where sort of the self-blame started. You know, where it was like I felt like if I had known my dad, or if I had a better relationship with him, that I could have been the person to give him that help, or I could have been the person to be there for him, and my family could have been, you know, exactly the same. But I think a lot of the time that you have to understand that when somebody feels that way, you know, that a lot of things that you can say or do just won't really make a difference, which is the unfortunate part. But I found solace in that, in the sense that I blamed myself or felt a certain level of guilt about it for a long time, and that definitely made me feel better, because, you know, when it happens, it happens, and there's not a lot that you can do, really. So
yeah, but I'm sure a lot of kids, you know, possibly go through the same kind of thing.
Yeah,
you know,
I would think so. Yeah. I think with any, because I've got friends who've experienced suicide firsthand as well, and you know, they've lost family and friends of their own through it, and they said that they felt exactly the same way, where it was sort of like, you know, I wish I could have stopped it, or I wish I could have helped, and you know, you look at what happened with Chester Bennington yesterday from Linkin Park. It's sort of, you can just never expect it. You really can't, you know, and that's why you should never really blame yourself, or you should never feel guilt, because there's probably not a lot that you could have done, really. Because, like I say, when I said I come from, you know, a pretty strict working class family, so it was very much sort of social norms, in the sense that it was, you know, the men are the men, and you know, that's it, you know what I mean, and they don't have feelings, they don't cry, they don't, you know, they get on with it, they toughen up and they do it, and I really hated that, for lack of a better word, to be honest, because I really don't agree with the whole, you know, stigmatisation of masculinity and all that kind of thing. So I think that the thing that helped me by going to university was just sort of being surrounded by a lot of like-minded people down there, and I was encouraged to express myself for the first time when I was at Leeds College of Music, because that's what I was there to do, really. So it was sort of, I had, for the first time, I had the space to be able to just write the music I wanted to write and say the things I wanted to say, and I think it was sort of a gradual process where at first it was a bit weird, and it was a bit unnatural to be able to talk about this and openly talk about it. But after I did the counselling, I knew that I felt much more comfortable with it, and I felt much more open about talking about it, because I was able to, with someone who would listen to me. So it was much easier for me to come away from that and then have more conversations with other people about it, you know.
What would you like to see, you know, for your life onward now, in terms of even looking at all of this?
I mean, like right now, I'm more comfortable than I've ever been, really, about how I feel and about how I'm doing, because, like I was saying earlier on, you know, the depression was very much situational, and it was very much like something that I needed to become comfortable with. But now that I understand it, and now that I understand, you know, what happened with my dad, and I've made my peace with that, it's sort of like I feel like I can get on with what I want to do, and I'm doing everything that I wanted to do about 5 years ago. So that's the biggest positive, is, you know, I did manage to pull myself through it and just sort of get on with it. So I guess I just want to keep going on how I am at the moment, you know.
And I know you probably want to even raise awareness.
Yeah, of course.
You know.
Yeah. You know, I've done like sort of various conversations and stuff with other people, and I spoke on BBC Radio Leeds and stuff like that. And I'd really like to do more of that, really, to be honest, because it's something that I hold very close, of course, and just to be able to do stuff like this and have people actually, you know, turn up and listen is really important, like really, really important. And I just want to see more of that. So anything I can do to help that process is where I want to be.
So when can we see the EP coming out?
Probably
Put you on the spot
about
now.
probably like Christmas. 'Cause me and Joe have to go back to Leeds and work on it now. So probably be like about Christmas time.
Thank you all so much.
Yeah,
for
thank
coming.
you. Thank you for coming out and actually
Yeah.
listening. This is, like I say, it's so important that people come out and do stuff like this. So yeah,
And thank you, Ryan, for
of course.
coming
yeah.
over. It's been an absolute privilege.